Hey folks, today's show is brought to you by Amazon. If you're going to shop at Amazon, please go to lookingbackpodcast.com. Click the Amazon button on the front page. What that does is that if whatever you spend, they kick back a little money my way. It's a great way to help the show out. If you want to donate to the podcast, click that donate button on the front page. You can give a one-time donation or a monthly donation. All donations get to help create content, come up with show ideas, show topics, making this more enjoyable for you. We're also brought to you by Hulu.com. If you want 2 weeks free of Hulu, and come on, who doesn't want something that's free? Click the link in the description box below. You get 2 weeks free of Hulu Plus. Hulu Plus is a great alternative when Netflix takes some shows down that you wanted to watch. They took down pretty much all of Top Gear. They took down Blackadder. They took down Law and Order. They took down a lot of really good shows to make room for other stuff, which I can get that. They only have a certain amount of space. But Hulu is really great. What Hulu does is, say you missed an episode of Parks and Rec. Let's say that was still on. I think it's still on. Let's say you missed an episode of Parks and Rec. What you could do is, the day after, say it premiered on a Thursday, you could go on Friday and watch the current episode. You can't get any better than that. But yeah, Hulu.com. Click that link in the description box below. Get yourself 2 weeks free. It's only like $7.99 a month. So you figure Netflix and Hulu, $16 a month. What more can you ask for? So definitely check that link out if you're interested. Get yourself 2 weeks free. I get 2 weeks free myself. It's a great way to help out with some of the cost. And with that, boom, shalaka boom. We're going to continue our series on Iron Maiden. This is episode 4, Bruce Dickinson Years Part 2. We're going to talk about Somewhere in Time, Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, and No Prayer for the Dying. So enjoy this episode of Looking Back, and thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. And let's take a look back at Somewhere Back in Time. Well, what's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to another episode of Looking Back, where we take a look back at interesting things. We're continuing our series on Iron Maiden, and that little snippet was the title track of the Iron Maiden album, Somewhere in Time. That album came out in 1986 on EMI in Europe and on Capitol Records in North America. It was re-released in 1998 under Sanctuary Columbia Records. The studio follow-up to the hugely successful Powerslave Live After Death pair, it was their first album to feature guitar synthesizers. Since its release, it's been certified platinum by the RIAA, having sold over 1 million copies in the US alone. And Somewhere on Tour was this album's supporting tour. Somewhere in Time is the band's first studio effort following the extensive World Slavery Tour of 1984-85, which was physically draining for the band, lasting 331 days and comprising 187 concerts. The resulting exhaustion is credited as a main factor in the complete lack of songwriting contributions from Bruce Dickinson, whose material was rejected by the rest of the band. Dickinson had written several acoustic-based songs, explaining that, quote, "I felt we had to come up with our physical graffiti or Led Zeppelin 4. We had to get it onto another level or we'd stagnate and drift away." Although bassist and primary writer Steve Harris, quote, "thought he'd lost the plot completely, surmising that he was probably more burnt out than anyone at the end of that last tour." So on the other hand, the record was also notable for the number of fully formed songs written by guitar player Adrian Smith, who wrote both of the album's singles, Wasted Years and Stranger in a Strange Land, the former, which is the only song on the record not to feature synthesizers. So, following the World Slavery Tour, the group was given 4 months to recuperate, with Harris, Smith, and Dave Murray, the guitar player, spending time experimenting with new equipment. The result was a marked change in sound for Iron Maiden, as it was their first to use guitar synthesizers. Although on their next release, 1988's Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, the effects were provided by keyboards instead. So, given their time off, this was the first studio album not to be released a year after the previous one. The band insisted that they have more time to get it right without hurrying for a change, as Steve Harris said. It was also one of their most expensive records, with the bass and drums recorded in the Bahamas, the guitar and vocals recorded in the Netherlands, and the mixing taking place in New York. Although space and time are common themes throughout this album, with songs like Wasted Years, Caught Somewhere in Time, Stranger in a Strange Land, and Deja Vu, the band never intended it to be a concept album. Steve Harris said this, quote, "We certainly never went in there and said, right, let's write a whole lot of songs on the subject of time," end quote. While the majority of the songs on the release have disappeared from the band's live shows shortly after its supporting tour, Wasted Years and Heaven Can Wait have often been played since. Performances of Heaven Can Wait have featured groups of local fans and celebrities invited on stage to sing along during the song's middle section. There was also a 2008 tribute album called Made in Heaven, a tribute to Iron Maiden, which was released by Kerrang. Features covers of two of the album's songs, Wasted Years by the band Devil Driver and Caught Somewhere in Time by Medina Lake. Um, Something very interesting about the album art is created by the band's then regular artist Derek Riggs, displaying a cyborg enhanced Eddie in a futuristic Blade Runner inspired environment. Much like the cover of Power Slave, the wraparound album cover holds a plethora of early Iron Maiden albums and songs. I'm gonna put a link in the description box below to that artwork. Um, so click that link, and we can go through the album itself. All right, you ready? Okay, click it now. Okay, the street sign on the corner where Eddie is standing says Acacia, which is partially obscured. That's a reference to the song 22 Acacia Avenue from the album Number of the Beast, which came out in '82. Below Acacia is a poster of Eddie from the first album, with graffiti reading Eddie Lives written on it. Torn posters also featured on the Sanctuary and Women in Uniform singles. A banner with the words, "This is a very boring painting," is displayed backwards within the lobby of Bradbury Towers Hotels International. This can be seen to the left of Eddie's right leg. In the very center, just above the department sign and behind the cable going to the cyborg's weapon, there is a small vertical phrase in red neon, which is Russian for "it's tearing me up," depending on how you read it. Um, an Eye of Horus neon sign is at the top of the building, which is a reference to the song Power Slave from the '84 album of the same name. Under Eddie's left leg, there's a rubbish bin attached to a lamppost, identical to the one seen on the cover of their first album, Iron Maiden. The haloed black cat from the back cover of Live After Death, which came out in '85, um, is on the pavement behind Eddie. Below the Eye of Horus is the name Webster's, which is a tribute to Charles Webster, the art director of EMI. Derek Riggs' artistic signature symbol can be found on Eddie's chest. Just above the neon sign, just above the Ruskin Arms, is a neon sign that read Rainbow, another famous venue where Iron Maiden recorded a video in 1980. That video um, is pretty cool. Above and to the left of the rainbow sign is a neon sign reading L'Amour's Beer Gardens, in reference to the L'Amour's rock venue, which Iron Maiden once played in New York. On the roof of the same building is a TARDIS from the BBC series Doctor Who. The TARDIS is also featured on the cover of the Wasted Years single. Above the Bradbury Tower, the neon sign is an Icarus in flames falling from the sky, in the same style of the cover for the band's single in '83, Flight of Icarus. According to Riggs, Icarus is supposed to look like the logo used by Swan Song Records, a label founded by Led Zeppelin. On the walkway above the clock is an electronic sign that says latest results West Ham 7, Arsenal 3. which is a nod to Steve Harris, who is a West Ham supporter, but we're not going to hold that against him. Glory, glory, Man United. Um, at the right edge below, just nearing the band, there's another sign in Russian, Kiefer, which it literally means yogurt. Just above the Kiefer sign is a street sign reading Upton Park, which is where West Ham's football stadium is located. There's a sign which reads Tonight Gypsy's Kiss, which is in reference to Steve Harris's first band. On the right above Bradbury Tower's sign is a sign in Japanese, which refers to a notable Japanese philosopher, economist, and critic, Akira Asada. To the right of the pyramids is a sign reading Long Beach Arena, which is where most of the Live After Death Live album was recorded. The CENTCOM sign refers to the 1961 NASA program of the same name. The neon sign above the band reading Maggie's Revenge and refers to Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, who appeared on the cover of Sanctuary and Women in Uniform. One of the buildings is labeled Asimov Foundation, and that is in tribute to Isaac Asimov. It's a reference to the Foundation series that he wrote. A character wearing a large cloak stands above the walkway's right side, which Riggs claims is Batman. Above and slightly to the left of the cloaked character reads more Hebrew lettering, um, which in English means Jinn. On the right side of the walkway and just above the latest results sign is a bracket that holds Eddie's skull together from the Peace of Mind album onwards, which Riggs drew as a cartouche. In the bottom right-hand corner, all 5 members of the band are standing in line. Dickinson is holding a brain, in reference to Peace of Mind, and drummer Nico McBrain is wearing aviator goggles. He had a pilot's license by this time, long before Dickinson, and a t-shirt that says Iron What. According to Riggs, the band complained because pictures of themselves were not accurate enough. To the right of Long Beach Arena is a sign that says Hammerjacks, a nightclub and concert hall in Baltimore frequented by the band. Below Hammerjacks is a sign that says Teehee's Bar, which is where the choir vocals in the middle of Heaven Can Wait were recorded. To the left of the clock is a sign that says Herbert Ailes, which is a reference to the author Frank Herbert, who wrote the book Dune, upon which the Iron Maiden song To Tame a Land is based. Herbert also died that same year, so explaining the word Ailes, the reference also refers to the unfriendly response the band received from Herbert by his agent regarding the use of the word Dune as a song title. Beneath the Phantom Opera House sign, there's a sign that reads EMI Rec. All of the band's albums inside North America, or outside North America, have been released by EMI. The track list for this album, Caught Somewhere in Time, that was a little bit that you heard at the beginning. Then you had Wasted Years, Sea of Madness, Heaven Can Wait, The Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner, Stranger in a Strange Land, Deja Vu, and Alexander the Great. There are also there's also a reissue, a bonus disc in '95 with the song "Reach Out." There is a cover of a Marshall Fury song called "Juanita." There's a song based on an old Urchin song called "Life in the City" that was now called "Sheriff of Huddersfield." And there's also a song originally recorded by a band called FM, and it's called "That Girl." It's a really great song. One of my favorite B-sides that they did. So that is Somewhere in Time. And let's continue on. Let's talk about one of my favorite Iron Maiden albums, Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. That little snippet that you heard is the title track um, of their 1988 album, Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, released in Europe on EMI. and in the US released on Capitol Records. It was also re-released by the same label in 2002. It was their first Iron Maiden release to feature keyboards, and like Number of the Beast and later on Fear of the Dark and The Final Frontier, which we'll get into in a future episode, it debuted at number 1 in the UK. It also marked the first appearance of many prog rock elements that the band would use frequently in later albums, seen in length and odd time signatures of the title track Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, and by the fact that it's a concept album. The idea to base the album around the folklore concept of the seventh son of a seventh son came to Steve Harris after he read Orson Scott Card's The Book Seventh Son. Steve Harris says this, quote, "It was our seventh studio album, and I didn't have a title for it or any ideas at all. Then I read the story of the seventh son, this mystical figure that was supposed to have all these paranormal gifts like second sight and what have you. And it was more, at first, it was just a good title for the seventh album, you know. But then I rang Bruce and started talking about it, and the idea just grew." Now, after his songwriting contributions were rejected from the band's previous album, Somewhere in Time, Bruce felt that his role within the band had diminished, and he, quote, just became the singer. But he felt renewed enthusiasm when Harris explained the concept to him. Bruce said this, quote, "I thought, what a great idea, brilliant. And of course I was really chuffed too because he'd actually rung me to talk about it and asked me if I had any songs that might fit that sort of theme. I was like, well, no, but give me a minute and I'll see what I can do." So when he talks about the album in later years, he remarks, quote, "We almost did something great. It was only half a concept album. There was no attempt to see it all the way through like we really should have done. Seventh Son has no story. It's about good and evil, heaven and hell, but isn't every Iron Maiden record?" End quote. In addition to Dickinson's return to writing, the album was also notable for its number of co-written pieces. In contrast to its predecessor, with 5 of the 8 tracks being collaborative efforts, according to Harris, this is probably because they spent more time checking up on each other to see what everyone else was up to, just to make sure that the story fitted properly and that it went somewhere. Stylistically, Seventh Son developed the sound first heard on Somewhere in Time, although on this occasion, the synth effects were created by a keyboard. The album debuted at number 1 in the UK, their first since Number of the Beast, as well as number 12 in the US, while the singles Can I Play with Madness and The Evil That Men Do, as well as a live version of The Clairvoyance and Infinite Dreams reached number 3, number 5, number 6, and number 6 positions respectively in the UK. Um, Adrian Smith says that Can I Play with Madness is their first proper hit single. The Clairvoyance was the first track written for the album, and according to Harris, the song's lyrics were inspired by the death of psychic Doris Stokes, after which he wondered to himself whether, quote, she could foresee her own death. Harris then began to write the song Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, which gave him the idea of turning the full album into a concept album, given that the main character would also have the power of clairvoyance. According to Adrian Smith, the song Can I Play with Madness actually started out as a ballad he was working on called On the Wings of Eagles. Then Bruce had a verse for it, wanted to change the title to Can I Play with Madness? And he said, quote, "I must admit it did sound better that way, so we took that one and Steve liked it. It was Steve who came up with the time change in the middle, the instrumental passage, which again gave it that lift it needed." And according to Dickinson, however, Harris's addition resulted in, quote, "a big row." Adrian absolutely hated it. Um, the song Moonchild is based on the Aleister Crowley novel of the same name. Infinite Dreams is about a character who implores a spiritualist to unlock the meaning behind his dreams. The final track, Only the Good Die Young, closes the storyline and is later featured in an episode of Miami Vice. The record opens and closes with an identical brief acoustic piece accompanied by 2 verses of lyrics written by Dickinson. Um, the songs Evil That Men Do, The Clairvoyant, and Can I Play with Madness have been played live and most frequently following the 7th tour of a 7th tour. According to Ron Smallwood, the manager of the band, and the brief given to Derek Riggs is to create, quote, something surreal and, in his words, quote, bloody weird. Riggs said this, quote, They said they wanted one of my surreal things. It's about prophecy and seeing the future, and we want one of your surreal things. That was the brief. I had a limited time to do the picture. I thought it was a pretty weird their concept, so I just went with that. So, um, according to Dickinson, his revitalized enthusiasm brought about by Harris's idea to make it a concept album carried forth into the cover art. Um, the idea to set the painting in a polar landscape might have originated when he showed Riggs a Gustave Doré piece depicting traders frozen in a lake of ice in the ninth circle of Dante's Inferno. In contradiction to this, Riggs said that the setting was, quote, because I mean, I've just seen a documentary about the North Pole or something. I wanted something that was a departure from all the cityscapes and things. It's about prophecy and seeing the future. So I wanted something distant. And then they said on the back, could you stick all the eddies in the ice? So I did. Speaking about the depiction of Eddie, Riggs said, quote, I thought, I don't like painting all of Eddie, so I'll get rid of him. I'll chop him off, make it look like all kinds of non-pleasant. In addition to the lobotomy and cyborg enhancements left over from the Piece of Mind and Somewhere in Time album covers, this incarnation also comes with a baby in his left arm, an apple inspired by the Garden of Eden, and featured a red and green yin and yang. On top of this, Eddie's head's on fire, which Riggs states is a symbol for inspiration, an idea that he stole from Arthur Brown. In his words, stole from Arthur Brown. Um, the reception was good. It was very good. Um, in 2005, in Rock Hard Magazine, their book they put out, 500 Greatest Rock and Metal Albums of All Time, it ranked number 305. And this album gave Iron Maiden that progressive sound that they started leaning more towards. And it was one of, I really think the first video that I saw from Iron Maiden was Can I Play With Madness? That also is available on their Visions of the Beast DVD, which has a lot of their videos. I think it goes up to 2001. I think it goes up to Wicker Man. But that's pretty much all there is to say about Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. So we're going to now talk about the final album in this episode, the 1990 album, No Prayer for the Dying. That is a little snippet of the song that Bruce wrote for one of his solo albums, but they decided to put it on um, this one. The album came out in 1990. It marked their first lineup change since '83. Adrian Smith left the band during the pre-production phase. He was unhappy with the musical direction. He only contributed to one song called Hooks in You. He was replaced by Jonick Gers, who had previously worked with Bruce on his first solo album, Tattooed Millionaire. He also worked with Ian Gillan and former Marillion singer Fish, as well as the new wave of British heavy metal band White Spirit. Although it received generally mixed to negative reviews, it peaked at number 2 in the UK albums charts, and it contained the band's only UK single, chart number 1, the song called Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter. The album does not follow the continuity. The album cover doesn't follow the continuity of previous covers. Eddie no longer exhibits either his lobotomy or cyborg enhancements. Two versions of the cover exist. The original 1990 version has Eddie bursting from his grave and grabbing a gravedigger by the neck. As the band manager Rod Smallwood disliked the figure, he asked Derek Riggs to remove him from the cover for the 1998 re-release, although the original artwork is used on the disc itself. Adding, Additionally, an inscription was added to the plaque on the tomb, which Riggs had initially left blank to allow the band to add their own words, and it reads, "After the daylight, the night of pain that is not dead, which can rise again." The picture disc LP shows Eddie firing a weapon made of 4 machine guns, a reference to the album's opening track, Tail Gunner. It has the original art cover on side 2. A lot of the reviews said this album just didn't. They said it just didn't add up. It just did not sound good. Um, Sorry, I almost yawned. No Prayer for the Dying includes the hit song "Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter." In spite of a ban by the BBC, it remains their only UK #1 single to date. It's a tongue-in-cheek song written by Bruce and originally recorded for his solo band for the Nightmare on Elm Street 5 soundtrack. Harris decided that the song would be a great for Maiden, and so the band re-recorded it. Following Bruce's departure from Maiden in '93, songs from No Prayer for the Dying have been largely ignored as live performances. Um, Bring Your Daughter was the only song played on the post '93 setlist, appeared on the band's 2003 summer tour. No Prayer on the Road was the tour in support of this album. There are 2 singles from this album, Holy Smoke and, of course, Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter. Um, the album departed the keyboard and synthesizer saturated prog rock direction in favor of a more stripped down, straightforward approach, reminiscent of their earlier material, which ushered in a change of vocal style for Bruce, from the operatic voice of the '80s to a more raspier way of singing. Um, the idea to move, the idea to make a more street level release also inspired the band to record in a barn on Steve Harris's property in Essex. That meant that it was the first Iron Maiden album to be recorded in their home country since '82's Number of the Beast. Bruce said that this idea was a mistake, saying, quote, "It was shit. It was a shit sounding record and I wish we hadn't done it that way. At the time I was guilty as anyone in saying, oh great, look, we're all covered in straw. What a laugh." So the album was also departed from literary and historical figures, the lyrical themes, in favor of more political content, songs focusing on religious exploitation, such as the song Holy Smoke, social concerns, the song Public Enemy #1. No Prayer for the Dying is also the only Iron Maiden album to date without a song over 6 minutes long, and it's the only one to contain profanity in the lyrics. In the song Holy Smoke, flies around shit, bees around honey. It was also their first release with Epic Records in the US after the band left Capitol, but it was sold through EMI for all territories outside the US. Despite charting well in most countries, particularly in the UK where it debuted at #2, it would be the band's last album to receive gold certification in the US. The track listing on this one is the opening track Tail Gunner, and then Holy Smoke, No Prayer for the Dying, Public Enemy #1, Fate's Warning, The Assassin, Run Silent, Run Deep, Hooks in You, Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter, and then finally the last track, Mother Russia. In 1995, on the reissue bonus disc, there were 4 covers. All in Your Mind by Stray, Kiss Me Ce Soir by Golden Earring, I'm a Mover by Free, and Communication Breakdown by Led Zeppelin. That is the 3 albums that I want to talk about in this episode. The next one, we will get into well, you know what? Yeah, we'll get into um, this one because this album deserves its own episode. So the next episode, we will talk about the very last Bruce Dickinson album, Fear of the Dark. So thank you for listening. I really appreciate it, and I hope you're enjoying this series. I know I'm enjoying recording it. So till next time, take care of yourself and each other.